Hi, everyone. Come on in and grab a seat. It's so nice to have you here tonight for From the Archives, branching out. So we'll be talking about this wonderful project. I'm Tracy Schwartz. I am the Vice President of Docomomo Wisconsin. Our chapter promotes awareness, appreciation, protection of modern architecture and design all across the state of Wisconsin. And we do that through documentation, advocacy, and engagement efforts. So we really enjoy this. That being said, the Milwaukee Public Library has a tremendous archive. They have the largest architectural archive in the state. So it's incredible and it's a wonderful resource. And we want to thank the library for hosting us this evening. Thank you so much. I would like to introduce you to Emily Hankins, who will be doing this presentation. Emily is a researcher and a writer of art history. She received her master's from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee in art history with an emphasis on prints and curation. She currently researches with Vogel Design Group, and she is the registrar at the Warehouse Art Museum. Emily and our chapter president, Eric Vogel, who could not be here with us this evening, have been working on this project for a little over 2 years. And tonight we get to have this experience of the lecture, so we're really excited about that. There will be a period of question and answer after, and we'll get a chance to browse the documents and all of the beautiful displays that we have out there afterwards. So look forward to that. And if you would like to find out more about Docomomo, we have some links over here. You can check out our website. It's a wonderful resource. We also have Instagram and Facebook, so follow us on those social media platforms as well. And again, thank you for being here. I'd like to introduce you to Emily. Come on up.
Thanks, Emily. I'm so happy. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Tracy, for giving me an introduction. Welcome, everyone. I'd like to thank Docomomo for making this talk a reality and investing in this research. It's been a real pleasure to work on. To that end, I'd also like to thank Eric Vogel. I know he's not here tonight, but he'll probably be watching this later. And I'd just like to thank him for bringing these branches to my attention and bringing me onto this project. And he's been guiding me through this process for, again, like over 2 years. So it'll be really fun to tell you the fruits of my labor. So, and then finally, I'd love to thank all the MPL librarians, Bob and Casey, certainly, and basically, if any librarian saw me on a Saturday looking at the plans, thank you so much. I talked to so many of you about your experiences at the library, which was really wonderful, and a great insight into how you felt in the buildings and everything like that. So thank you for that. And also, I'm really glad to be doing this talk in this room, the Richard E. and Lucille Krug Rare Books room. I'm going to be talking a lot about Richard Krug, so it just seems like a full circle moment to be talking to you about him here. So let's get started. How many of you are familiar with this building? Okay, great. Wonderful. So for those who don't know, this is the Milwaukee County War Memorial Center by Lanen, a Finnish-American architect. It was built between 1955 and 1957. Many people view it as an iconic part of mid-century Milwaukee, and it certainly is, and many consider it one of, if not the first, buildings of mid-century monumental buildings in Milwaukee. But what you might not know is it isn't exactly the first. So in 1954, construction began on the strikingly modern Grassold Johnson addition to the Central Library, a full year before the War Memorial. It had been in the works at the Milwaukee Public Library since before World War II. This huge addition provided badly needed storage and seating spaces with state-of-the-art fireproof shelving and a drive-up book drop. The modern design and attention to detail in acknowledging ever-growing automobile culture suggests that the MPL had a vested interest in bringing the library into contemporary times. So the Central Edition would come to set the tone of an innovative and modern aesthetic on Wells Street, ushering in multiple large-scale mid-century public use buildings in about a 3-block span here, including the Milwaukee State Office Building, 1961, the Milwaukee Public Museum in 1962, and the Milwaukee Fire Department Administration Building, also in 1962. Of particular note are Eschweiler & Eschweiler, a prolific Milwaukee architecture firm I'm sure many of you are very familiar with, who designed the Milwaukee Public Museum, and Alonzo Robinson, the first Black registered architect in Wisconsin, who designed the Fire Department Admin Building. On a slightly smaller scale, in 1953, the same architecture firm for the addition, Grassold Johnson, built the Finney Library, which replaced the existing but not adequate in space Lisbon Library. Though not as monumental as the Central Edition, it nevertheless contained innovative concepts of space and accessibility that would come to typify mid-century architecture. It even won Grassold Johnson the 1955 Award of Merit in Architecture, a competition sponsored by the Wisconsin chapter of the American Institute of Architects. Importantly to the MPL's history, it would eventually serve as the blueprint for an extensive plan, a 10-year plan that ultimately constructed in total, in total 10 new branch libraries and 1 addition, here's the addition, to an existing branch to better serve the post-World War II population boom in Milwaukee. So what do all these buildings kind of amount to? So I argue it suggests that the MPL was a Milwaukee pioneer, an early adopter of modern architecture for the library, which heralded even more mid-century modern public buildings to come. The aims of the modern library, to be a community center, have meeting spaces for people, and provide important classes, matched up very well with aspects of mid-century architecture. And the library's addition and branches reflect this connection. An emphasis on artistry, innovation, and accessibility are very apparent in these buildings. Mid-century Milwaukee architecture and the library's history are intertwined, and the MPL should be recognized for this legacy. To begin mapping this out, we'll first take a trip to the library's beginnings. So, the Milwaukee Public Library was established officially by the city in 1878. They took over the rented location of the Young Men's Association, which provided a library subscription service beginning in 1847 that eventually amassed 10,000 books, most of them German language. When it became clear that the library should have a permanent building, a national competition was held to design the new library headquarters. Frank Lloyd Wright was among the 74 architects who sent in their designs. He did not get his design pick, though. The Milwaukee-based Ferry and Kloss firm ended up as the winners with their Renaissance, Revival, U-shaped design. That library building, the Central Library, opened on October 3rd, 1898, and it also housed the Milwaukee Public Museum at the time. MPL's holdings remained largely at the Central Library location, but they also had moved collections to book depositories in existing locations like grocery stores. Slightly larger collections were housed in rented-out storefronts, such as Burley here, and it's a storefront library. It wasn't built for library use, but it's such a beautiful Art Deco storefront, so I wanted to include it. In 1887, the Bayview neighborhood was annexed into Milwaukee after previously being designated as Milwaukee's first suburb. Now that Bayview was able to receive public services from the city, the Bayview Library branch was born, housed in a storefront and stocked by duplicate books from the Central Library and local book collections. The second library building to be constructed solely for library use was the neoclassical South Division Library, right here, which opened on June 16, 1910. In 1913, the aforementioned Bayview Library received a permanent plot of land at 907 East Russell Avenue, where a new neoclassical-inspired building by architects Van Ryn and de Gellicke opened on June 20th, 1914. Though various storefront libraries and hybrid buildings have been designated as branches throughout the late 1800s, early 1910s, MPL would not build another building strictly for library purposes until the Finney branch in 1953. So I keep referring to this plan and Krug and all of this, and this plan was spearheaded by Richard E. Krug. So he is a little unorthodox as far as librarians go. He was trained as a lawyer, and though he started at a firm right out of school, the Great Depression stymied that career. So he ended up applying to a municipal reference librarian position after a friend told him about it. And after scoring the highest marks ever on the civil service exam, he got the job. Even though he did not have a library sciences degree, he became utterly committed to the library, rising through the ranks and becoming assistant librarian in 1939 and city librarian in 1941, a role he would keep longer than any other city librarian in the history of MPL. Krug was a major force for making dramatic changes to the Milwaukee library system during his time in library administration. He revamped various departments of the library and fielded questions about censorship of books. Krug oversaw the acquisition of the Charles Alice Home starting in 1945. And after World War II, his two major objectives were to 1, facilitate an expansion of the Central Library, and 2, revamp the library branches with new buildings to accommodate the post-war population boom. To make this happen, Krug had various library collaborators, including Assistant City Librarian Meredith Bloss, and R. Paul Bartolini and Nolan Neds, who were supervisors of neighborhood libraries and extension services spanning the library building program. Their names come up a lot in the archives. A lot of them were in communication with various other libraries. There was an instance of the Lake Geneva Library was looking to create a new building, and they sent them the plans from Finney, which kind of goes to show you that the MPL was kind of pioneering these kinds of buildings, and other libraries in the state were interested in knowing about them. So let's look at that first project, the Central Addition. So by the 1940s, the Central Library had become inadequate in size. The library still shared space with the Milwaukee Public Museum and had storage problems that were exacerbated when all books published prior to 1940, about 200,000, were put in storage to accommodate space for newer materials. Due to these concerns, Krug sought to obtain funding for the construction of a Central Library Addition, a crusade that started from his first year as city librarian in 1941. He had to fight for the library against the board of the Milwaukee Public Museum, which was seeking funding for their own building. In 1947, Krug prevailed, and with backing from Mayor Frank P. Zeidler, the library secured a federal loan to fund the $3,500,000 project. The Central Addition was designed by Grassold Johnson, an architecture firm that we will see also were major players in the story of the branches. This photo shows Krug over here, Herbert Grassold, and Elmer A. Cron, who was the president of the library board at the time, viewing building plans for the Central Addition. This was in 1949, 2 years after securing the funding in 1947. So then that building opens in 1957, so it's about 10 years that this kind of is being worked on. Construction was set for 1953, but actually began in 1954, and the addition opened in 1956-57. The addition aimed, quote, to provide more books more efficiently to more people, as the construction sign out front put it. Images of construction show the methodical process of erecting a structure made to hold heavy shelving and accommodate large open areas held up by columns for sitting and reading. These images also show a glimpse of what appears to be an integrated construction crew of black and white workers. Though its streamlined modern facade seems in stark contrast to the 1898 library, the Grassold and Johnson Addition does share a similar diagram to the original entrance, with its vertical organization highlighted in the centralized bumped out windows, if I can get over there, and prominent corners. So they have that. It is aligned with the central axis of the existing building, and it is about 2 stories shorter, allowing the addition to connect to the original plan, but also giving it room for both buildings to exist as their own structures. Although they are similar, this strikingly modern design sends a message. This is a library that is solidly in the present while looking towards the future. All right, now we're going to get into the branches. So, alongside Richard Krug's campaign for a Central Library Addition were his ambitions for replacing and adding library branches within the Milwaukee city limits. As mentioned, most branches at the time were small, rented storefront locations that were unable to expand their branches at the time. Due to dramatic annexation policies starting in earnest at the turn of the 20th century, that doubled the city's land area, there was an urgent need for new, larger libraries to accommodate an ever-growing population. This goal was very ambitious and resulted in a 10-year plan that outlined Krug's and the library board's intended locations and basic tenets for new libraries. A nod to this plan was written by Krug in a March 1942 document, a year after he was appointed city librarian. Titled Tentative Long-Term Improvement Program for the Milwaukee Public Library, the document listed out Krug's concerns about collections care, inadequate space, and unsustainable branches located in old buildings. However, these branch concerns would not be revisited until after World War II, with a 1951 letter in regards to the construction of a branch library to replace the Lisbon Library. Titled Reconstruction of New Lisbon Library in 1952, this document, written by Krug, mentions that plans for new neighborhood libraries were drawn up in some capacity, and a federal loan had been secured, but due to the instability of World War II, no further plans were decided. This preliminary plan to establish a long-term program resulted in the construction of the Finney Library in 1953, which became the model for the 10-year building program. It exemplifies multiple concepts that would become touchstones of the rest of the branches, including an open flooring concept, large consecutive windows, and signage evoking a shopping center, street sidewalk level entrances, and the fluctuation of the inside and outside all at once. After Finney and the Central Addition, the only other buildings before the officially approved plan in 1962 were the Llewellyn Addition in 1959 and the Atkinson Library in 1961. Oh, there we go. This is kind of an aside, but while researching the library plans in the archive, I stumbled upon plans by Grassold and Johnson that further insinuated that the building project of Finney was being used as a model for future branch libraries. The plans were from 1951 and filed under Finney, but the structure was very different from Finney, and the project name was listed as the typical local residential branch library building, suggesting that these were plans for a prototypical library that could be replicated for every branch. This suggested building did not have the long, low profile of Finney, nor it appears the number of windows. The fact that this plan was scrapped may speak to a desire to let the branches have their own unique designs that could accommodate specific lots, allowing for more flexibility with acquiring land to build on. It took another 4 years after Finney for a branch plan to be formulated, and another 5 after that for the plan to be fully approved. The 1957 proposed development document, seen here on the left, was penned by Krug, who insisted that the library should approach the new branches as if they were stores and shopping centers, saying that, quote, the modern neighborhood library must avail itself of the modern techniques of the supermarket, end quote. This is also reiterated in the 1962 Milwaukee's 10-year library report. To back up this point on supermarkets, the 10-year report directly cites a 1957 essay titled Library Site Selection, written by architect Francis J. McCarthy in the News Notes of California Libraries. He argues that libraries should be looking to shopping centers as examples of how to make site selection decisions, creating a seamless integration of the library into the shopper's errands list, and in turn, increasing circulation and visitor numbers, as referenced in this quote here. This relationship to shopping centers becomes even more apparent when we start looking at the library's architectural programs. The 1962 report also outlines the major parameters for library site selection. The site picking process was varied, but overall the goal was to construct new library buildings with adequate space for visitors and books alike by replacing existing storefront libraries or adding new branches in places where the population had skyrocketed. This meant they were looking to serve 60,000 or more people and make the library a destination in each respective neighborhood with ample parking and public transportation access. So not just parking for cars, but also mass transit as well. And this idea of being near the high traffic area meant that they were looking for places where there already were stores and shopping centers to make the library kind of another errand in your day. Maybe you go to the grocery store and then you go pick up some books. Definitely an emphasis on transportation and accessibility in a lot of different ways while driving culture was kind of changing. Okay, as previously noted, Grassold and Johnson designed the bulk of the branches. They made over 2,000 buildings during the span of their career, and the 1960s is when they were churning out building after building, including schools, commercial buildings, and other public buildings. They oversaw both additions to the MPL system and ended up being the architects for the first and last of this era of construction. Von Grossman, Burroughs, and Van Lanen, later Architecture 360, designed 3 overall very distinct structures. With Forest Home and North, a specific emphasis was paid to the landscaping and the usage of self-sustaining materials, allowing for cost-effective longevity. Forest Home won the firm an AIA award for excellence, and the extensive marketing around its opening reflected how proud the library and architects were of this branch. There was a lot of, when I was looking through the folders, there were plenty of openings, sort of, they always designed a little card for the openings of the library, but for Forest Home, there was all kinds of different ads and all kinds of different exciting, trying to get the public excited about this building. There was even this newspaper article where they asked kids how they felt about the design, which was very cute and very fun. But they were obviously very proud of this building, so they put a lot of time into it. Darby, Bogner, and Associates designed 2 libraries back to back. They share some similarities, particularly in the windows, and they both have metal sculptural elements by Milwaukee artist Guido Brink. They are rectangular, allowing for flexible space inside, and they both have ample parking lots. So in the end, the library branch building program achieved 11 new builds for library use. Libraries were built back and forth between the north and the south every couple years, although the northern and eastern parts of the city ended up having the most libraries overall. For the south and north, bookmobiles and suburban branches filled in the gaps in access. So here I've overlaid an annexation map. So you can kind of see this lighter pink here and here was some of the most recent annexation. Up here is the Mill Road branch, one of the few that was not replacing a pre-existing branch, but had to have a whole new branch for that community. The thing I guess I will say about kind of there not being quite as many over here or down here. Down here is the airport, so that's what most of this land here is for. And we have West Allis and Wauwatosa, which already had their own public libraries, so that kind of serviced that area. All right, now we will take a look at the branches themselves and see how the proposed plan and ideals for the modern library manifest in the architecture itself. Each section will only highlight a few libraries at a time just to keep things focused, but most of the libraries share similar aspects. All right, so there are many facets of the libraries that evoke shopping centers. And these 2 quotes from the 1957 plan highlight 2 of the most important aspects: an insistence for automobile and public transit accessibility, and endeavoring to connect library use with everyday shopping patterns through architecture that evokes the shopping experience. The supermarket in Milwaukee, or not the supermarket, the shopping center in Milwaukee and the library system in a lot of ways grew up together. This is the Southgate Mall, opened in 1951. This was Milwaukee's first mall, and it was designed by a branch favorite, Grassold Johnson. One of the branch libraries, Oklahoma, later Zablocki, was built in 1963, just a 15-minute walk north of this very busy shopping center. The library may not have quite as large of signage as you can see here, typically, but branches did receive either standing signposts or their names emblazoned on the side of the building. The low profile, sidewalk, and parking access and copious windows will also be seen in the visual structure of many of the branch libraries as they evoke this consumer culture mindset. Perhaps one of the best examples is the Finney branch. These big windows and low profile and branding here on the side evoke the shopping center right away, but it becomes even more apparent when viewed alongside the other buildings on the block. It stands out with its modern architecture, but it also attempts to integrate into the block as a part of a whole with its inviting storefront windows at walking level. The Llewellyn Neighborhood Library Edition kept the pre-existing building but gave it a new modern facade. This included bringing the entrance to street level instead of at the top of a large staircase, bringing the library to the people rather than being a place where the public ascends the stairs to knowledge. It evokes a modern storefront with big windows to accommodate ample lighting and also allow passersby to, in essence, window shop. The design also utilizes the general footprint efficiently, using more of the square lot, but also going vertical to accommodate more space for books and spaces for gathering. Here are some preliminary sketches. I know there's a drawing of Llewellyn out there, but I want to bring your attention to this one over here. So you see it's a similar design as to what ends up being built, but then there's this very big signage of the library on the side. That doesn't end up happening, but you can definitely kind of see this idea of the library as a brand and this library as like a beacon in the community. And so, you know, it kind of connects to these shopping centers a little bit. Capitol Library by Grassold Johnson is a long, low building with decorative masonry and a decorative roofline that adds dimension and interest to the repetition of windows and brick. Another major shopping mall, Capitol Court, opened in 1956, and it was located just down the street from the Capitol Library. The architect was the Seattle-based John Graham and Company. The low-profile thoroughfare matches rather well with the library's facade. Capitol Library sits directly on Capitol Drive, and its large windows with branded signage allow drivers to take in the library at a glance. The parking lot in the back lets the library facade be the main focal point while allowing for increased car access. These elements evoke the very nearby shopping centers. This is East Library by Darby, Bogner Associates. It's another long, low building. This one has two entrances, one on the street and the other with a parking lot, which serves to accommodate both car and public transportation. Many of the libraries had additional artwork. We'll talk about some of them. This is the Guido Brink screen wall. Darby, Bogner Associates used Guido Brink's sculpture in the two libraries that they ended up designing. These artworks further humanize the brick and concrete and are visual reminders of the human capacity to create. They bring character to the space and add a whimsical decorative element that makes the space more exciting to visit. So this next section is outside in, windows, courtyards, and landscaping. In the 1957 plan on page 3, Krug says that, quote, "It is most important that the inside activities be visible from the walks and streets outside the building." This is a defining feature of many of the branch libraries, a desire to entice the outside world in, but also have those inside benefit from the outside with natural lighting, greenery, etc., becoming a refuge in the city. Large windows invite patrons in, like storefront windows at shopping malls, and once inside, these windows provide sunlight and create an inside-outside effect that connects those inside to the street and neighborhood outside. Straddling between commercial shopping centers and the sitting room culture of earlier libraries, these buildings aim to create a functional and inviting environment. Out back of Finney is a courtyard, which is also visible from inside the library. You can see the half wall that further encloses the space, with multicolored tops that match the repetitive windows around the rest of the library. This spot for rest, relaxation, and of course reading is another example of the flux between nature and the city so prevalent in this mid-century architecture. Here's another view of that. You can kind of see these tops here. And there's this greenery, but there's also it's paved here, so it's a little bit easier to manage than if it was just all green space, but it still gives that sense of nature. Okay. This is Oklahoma Library by Grassold Johnson and Associates. This library also has a courtyard with a central water feature evoking the Bill of Rights by George Adams Dietrich. Again, large windows allow a seamless transition between indoors and the outside, and the vertical repetition of the metal framing creates a contemplative pattern that emphasizes the windows. Now we're inside. Here is the angle from inside out into the courtyard. We can see space between the shelves that is able to accommodate tables and chairs for patrons, but is also a customizable space that could be converted for other uses as well. The striping of the windows is repeated in the radiating ceiling beams. It kind of goes up like that, adding cohesion to the overall design and emphasizing the natural light coming in from both sides of the building. So this picture doesn't show it, but there's these windows in here that go out to the courtyard, and then there's windows on the outside as well. And this is a model of the Forest Home Library. This building works in concert with the landscaping, large windows, and overarching tree-like beams to evoke nature in the concrete and steel. As you can see, it also accommodates for a parking lot. The landscaping purposely has
I think like the ultimate goals of the libraries were sort of broad and human focused, but the one thing I guess I'm curious about is books and what, if any, focus was on those, because they have weight and need of their own as they grow ever larger because we publish more. So is that in the conversation or sort of an afterthought?
Yes, absolutely. And when the buildings, there was usually a newspaper announcement of the libraries being built, and in those, they were kind of, they tell about the number of circulation that was in the library, and they were going to keep continuing to add. They, maybe said in a year there'll be 20,000 more, or something like that. So that was definitely a focus, and definitely the circulation was kind of why they were kind of approaching it with this store idea, this idea that, well, if people are going to be out and about, why not make the library feel like that's part of your everyday experience? So that was definitely a part of the conversation, and a continued, I guess, revamping of the collection as it went.
But what about the buildings storing the books?
Sorry.
No, you're good. There was on my graduate school campus, we had a historic library, and they had to take books out of it because the books were causing damage to the building.
Yes.
So I guess what I'm curious is, like, with some of them, you talked about librarians saying, oh, the stacks were preventing us from seeing people. So, like, were the books forethought of the architects or not?
Yes, in some buildings, I think that there was that idea, and certainly with the flexible use space, they would kind of designate certain areas for the stacks and then certain areas for where people could sit and everything like that. Mill Road's kind of the most notable one where librarians complained about, like, visual.
Yeah.
But it was definitely part of the discussion, and also Krug would have discussions with the librarians who were going to be working there about kind of where to place things. Some things like the circulation desk at Mill Road was kind of going to go there, but there was they did have a say. Obviously, the Circle building, there's only so much you can do, but there is evidence of him talking to the librarians and trying to figure out what works best for them. So hopefully that. Yes?
I have two questions. One, I'm more interested in Elmer Johnson, because I've been in his home. It's just absolutely incredibly integrated with nature. And I see his influence on his home in here. Was he or were they influenced by Frank Lloyd Wright in what I can see ways they were to be on one level and integrated with nature? And also, do you have a list of the buildings? Because I think the campus elementary school, which was the teacher training school of UWM, I think was built by them because I can see similarities. And then lastly, the MLK library that's now gone, that's being replaced. That's interesting because it seems to be a departure. It seems much more, less organic, more cold, more darker, just kind of less aesthetic than the other ones. Can you speak to any of those questions?
Yeah, I don't know everything that Grassold Johnson built per se, but what was the first question again? Sorry.
Frank Lloyd Wright.
Frank Lloyd Wright. I definitely see that in these buildings. I'm not as familiar with kind of what Grassold Johnson was thinking when they approached these buildings, but definitely Prairie School visuals are definitely part of that kind of longer, more horizontal way of looking at things. In terms of MLK, so Johnson is part of the architecture firm who worked on that, and it's definitely, the windows are gone, right? There's not a whole sense of that. It's not really all that clear. The library before that is Mill Road, and that one I guess also has a little less with like windows and everything, so I think it's just kind of moving, because this is like later 60s into the 70s, it's just kind of the architecture sensibility is sort of moving in a different direction. So I think that's what I would say about that.
Emily, that brutalistic style was, when King was built in that style, was it pretty contemporary with buildings that were going up on campuses too around the same time? Because UWM and Madison had a lot of buildings like that too.
Right, like Curtin Hall and places like that.
Yeah.
Kind of more, into the war period kind of thing, so definitely, yeah. Any other questions? Oh, Anne-Marie?
Thank you for a very nice presentation. I wonder if you can go back to the slide with all the branches and just talk a little bit about which ones are extant and which ones are still remaining.
Yes. It's going to take a second. It's out of the way. But there are, just before I get there, there are 3 that are extant but are not being used. There are 5 that are still extant and are still being used. And then there's 4 that were demolished and replaced, or just demolished, or there was a library nearby that could accommodate the same level. Let's see. So, takes its time.
Atkinson might be the only one left.
Here, we'll go, actually, we'll do,
Oh, yeah, Capital and Atkinson. Oh, yes, Lucky. So 3.
okay. Sorry.
There should only be 3, Capital, Atkinson, and Zablocki.
Tippy.
Yeah, so
Tippy was
so the central, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm including central in the building. So
One more.
okay. So so Finney is still extant. It's not in use. Central Library is obviously still in use. Llewellyn is extant, but it is not in use anymore. I think it was given to the state like last year. Atkinson is still being used. Oklahoma is still being used. Capitol is still being used. And then MLK had been recently demolished. And then Forest Home here has been sadly demolished. The North Milwaukee Villard Square became Villard Square, and then I think it's in 2011 it was replaced with a apartment and library combination. Mill Road is still a building, but it's not in use either. And then East has been replaced with the apartment library complex. And then Tippecanoe is still in use. So I think it got replaced, but yeah. Okay, did that answer your question, Henry?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yes, hello.
I had a question about the Central Library Edition. I don't know if you know this. It looks like there's no entrance on Wells originally.
Let's see.
And I don't know if you know when the entrance on Wells was added.
I think there was the entrance, but let me go back. Because that's the other plan.
I don't think it was included in the sketches. I think
And then
Yeah.
the sketches just didn't have it in it.
I think the picture right there doesn't seem to have it either.
Because it's kind of, I think that I think it's down here. I think it did move. I'm not entirely sure when it did move. It was really hard to find information about something, to be
well,
honest.
there's a loading dock at the west end.
Oh, okay.
But we can look at that at the library.
It might have been that this was like the book drop and the entrance at the time. Couldn't really tell. From
Okay,
the
yeah, I
plan,
don't know if
so
it
sorry.
came, I don't know if it came up when you were
Yeah,
studying.
yeah.
Then my question would be, why did they not have a door to Wells Street originally? But
Yes.
something to look into.
Yes, absolutely. And it might have been later in Midcentury that this was included.
Because the ADA entrance was added later, and the elevator was installed, so that might be
Yeah.
when that bigger entrance was put in.
Yes,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't have a better
No, that's
answer.
okay, I'm a librarian.
I didn't
No, it's good. No, it's helpful to know. Okay. Yes.
Did you find out any information about the sub-basements when they were building those? Was that hard to build on the foundation?
No, I didn't see anything about that. Construction, what I kind of looked at in the archives and the folders didn't really discuss too much about that. I didn't go as in depth because I had quite a few to go through. So I'm not entirely sure, but they are very fascinating. So, okay. Any other thoughts, questions? Yes?
So one thing that it seems like they prioritize adding in these neighborhood branches were community meeting rooms. Did you see any kind of priorities or guidelines for what the standards for those spaces should be when you were looking through the archives?
I think it was just kind of built into the overall plan with the architects. And then, yeah, they talked to the librarians about what space needs. There was definitely like meeting rooms that were asked to be included in the plans overall. and different like staff spaces and everything like that. So it was talked about in some of the correspondence I saw between the architects and Krug. So yeah, and I think the librarians had a little bit of a say in what that kind of looked like. So, yes?
And I might have missed it in the beginning, you know, the last lecture we had about the churches, the discussion really started with satisfying the population explosion, you know,
Yeah.
where there are just gobs of kids coming from every direction.
Yep.
And putting churches where there hadn't been churches, or upgrading churches, what have you. Is there a connection here with children and libraries and kind of foresight to say we need, maybe you said that, I was busy with the cameras.
No, that's okay. I think I maybe touched on it, but there was definitely, like, with the population boom and everything like that, the schools were, I guess the libraries were in touch with the schools and would often do school visits. A lot of the library branches that were built at this time were replacing old ones, so they were in roughly the same location most of the time. So they would serve those schools near them, and certainly any other schools that were being built at the time. So they definitely worked hand in hand in that way. In terms of site selection for them, though, it was to kind of replace or to put libraries in sort of a 60,000 people area that hadn't been serviced by the city yet. So, yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else with that. There was definitely correspondence in the archives that talked about how the library would, dissuade fears that the library is completely going away by having bookmobiles while these were being built for the schools to still use. So, yeah. Yes?
And just to kind of touch on your last point, it's interesting that there are like intermediary periods where there's the storefronts and then there were like temporary locations in things like old firehouses and things like that. I think that was Tippecanoe Library, they were briefly in a firehouse.
Yeah, absolutely. And there were other places where it was kind of some of the buildings now where there's like an apartment and there's a library at the ground floor kind of thing. But it was just they had gone into and kind of rented out that storefront. So yeah, it was interesting to figure out all these different branches that were just, you know, in a storefront, so they couldn't expand. And that's why there was, especially with the population boom, necessity to make sure that there was bigger buildings for that. So, anything else? Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, if you want to head outside, there's some beautiful displays. There's drawings and things from the archive, which I think will be really exciting to see. So go ahead and out there. I appreciate so much being able to be in this beautiful room in the library for our archive series, which we have in the spring and the fall.